What happens when you age a peated whiskey in 5 different types of casks? Well, we're gonna have to open this bottle and pour a wee dram to find the answer to that. Let's do this. Welcome to Whisky Riffs. I'm Kevin, and today we have a Port Charlotte heavily peated special edition. It's part of their Cask exploration series. It's called the Port Charlotte heavily peated, I single malt, but it's the OLC 01. So this whiskey is 55.1% ABV. It's about 9 years old. It says it was distilled in 2010 and bottled in 2020. And as part of the Cask exploration series, that means it was aged in 5 different types of casks. Let me go ahead and pour this whiskey so I can tell you a little bit more about it, and we'll let it breathe while I do that. So the breakdown of the casks are 30% first fill American whiskey cask, 40% second fill American whiskey cask, 25% Vin Doux Naturel cask, the VDN cask, and then there's 5% second fill Syrah cask. And lastly, the whole selection of casks are brought together in Oloroso sherry casks and aged for 18 months. This whiskey is using 100% Scottish barley, as is the tradition of Bruichladdich and a lot of their expressions. And the Oloroso casks are a little different. They're hogshead casks, which means they're smaller than the butt cask that you normally see a lot of sherries aged in, or a lot of whiskeys aged in when they're using ex-sherry casks. And the difference is when you have a smaller cask, you have more contact with the wood. More contact with the wood means more interaction with whatever flavors are in that wood. In this case, it's sherry. So I'm expecting a little bit of sweetness with this, and I'm expecting a lot of nuances given all those different types of casks. I'd love to know if you've had any of the Port Charlotte Cask Exploration series of whiskeys. There's a few of them out there. Leave me some notes in the comments. Tell me what you think of them. And especially if you've tasted this one before, I'd love to hear your tasting notes on it as well. As far as the distillery, if you've seen any of my videos, you've heard me brag about Bruichladdich. They are a great distillery. They really care about their whiskeys. I've made lots of videos about their different expressions. I'll put some of those links in the description below, and you can check those out when you have time. I'm looking forward to tasting this whiskey because I do love the Port Charlotte heavily peated 10-year, and I'm expecting this to be very different because of the number of casks that it's aged in and the type of cask it's aged in, and certainly that final casking of 18 months in a Oloroso sherry cask. There's definitely a lot of sweetness there. I'm not getting hit in the nose with the alcohol burn, which is pretty good for 55% or 55.1% ABV. And the peat and the smoke aren't that intense either. They're pretty light on this whiskey for having heavily peated on the label. Bruichladdich always has a much nicer nose for me as far as peat and smoke. It's never as aggressive as they say because it just has a different effect to me on my nose and my palate. So in addition to the sherry notes with the darker fruits, I'm also getting some citrus nose on that. I'm getting some spices down in there. It's not so much oak spice as it is like baking spices for me. The more I sit with it, I'm getting that honey, and it's drenched in that citrus zest. This is a very pleasant nose. If you like the sweeter notes, if you like those sherry notes, this is definitely going to appeal to you. You can see the color has a lot of variation. It's not a pure sherry cask color. It's got a lot of different influences in there. So I think it's more golden amber than it would be on the reddish tint of a lot of the sherry whiskeys. There's a lot of spice in the first taste. Long finish. Wow, if you have a cold night and you need to warm up your body, this right away does that to me. It just kind of filled me with that warmth and heat, and it's still going. That is an incredibly long finish for a whiskey. I'm guessing this is quite oily. I'm getting baking spices on the taste. I'm getting some chocolate, dark chocolate. I'm getting those raisin notes and dried plums. Like a spiced wine taste. Have you ever had, you've had that mulled wine, is it called? Where it's warmed up and it has that nice warming effect to you, but it also has all those little baking spice notes and sweeter notes to it. This is an incredibly complex whiskey. I love whiskeys like this. So one of the reasons that I tend to enjoy whiskey so much is because of the exploration. And this is the kind of whiskey where I can pour a dram of it and I can taste it again and again and get a few different notes. The finish for me is really long and then has those lingering notes in it as well. Like, I feel like I've had a very high percentage dark chocolate candy bar right now. That's what's sitting on the back of my tongue. And there's a little bit of oak spice there, some earthy notes that are lingering at the finish. But every time I taste it, I'm tasting just a little of something different. And that's gotta be due to all those different caskings that they've put this whiskey through and the different aging times and processes. Really well done selection of casks for this exploration series. I want to put some water in this, but I'm enjoying it so much without the water. I'll keep sipping on it. So let me go ahead and put some water in this before it gets too diluted by me emptying the glass. So when I'm adding water to whiskey, I try to do it in small amounts. That's this is a 1 milliliter dropper. So I try to put a milliliter at a time into it, see how that affects things, and then add a little more. You do have to give it some time though to work its way through, especially if there's a very oily whiskey. The first time you put water in, it's gonna push all those oils up to the surface. You're gonna get hit with those immediately. I'm getting more of the oak spice on the nose now after a little bit of water. And I've lost a little bit of the sweet notes. I guess it's the citrus that's gone away. I still get the honey, I still get the baking spices. Adding water to this whiskey gives me more of those sherry notes. I'm getting more of a sweetness on the linger. I'm also getting that spice right away when I taste it. So I think the initial hit after the water is spicy, but then as you let it linger on your tongue, there's more of that kind of honey and baking spice and sweetness from the sherry. Still really complex. This thing can take water definitely, and play around with it. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've added water to this whiskey, what your experience has been. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on a comparison video, but I do want to try it against the standard. So the Port Charlotte Heavily Peated 10 obviously is a 10-year whiskey. It's a little less ABV at 50% instead of 55. And I'm getting a lot more of the salty, briny, seaside notes right away. I'm not getting as much of the sweetness. It's a very different whiskey. Much simpler whiskey. Much more of that peat and brine and kind of that oak spice. Certainly none of the beautiful complex notes from the wines and the Syrah and the sherry that you're getting with the OLC. Yeah. The OLC is a much more complex whiskey than the Port Charlotte Heavily Peated 10. It's definitely an experience. So here's the problem with the Bruichladdich Port Exploration Series. They can be hard to find. Check around you. Let me know if you have any in stock in your area. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. I paid around $190 for this bottle, and I'm glad I did at the time, because now when I go back and look at the same places that I was looking before, it's not there. I did find it in stock and in San Francisco at the whiskey shop for, I think, $180. So you can get it. And I'd love to hear about your experience with getting any of the Cask Exploration series from Bruichladdich. I think it's a wonderful whiskey if you can find it, if you can get it. Is it worth $180, $190, $200? Really, that's up to you. If you like a complex peated whiskey, I don't think you can go wrong with this. I think this rivals expressions like the Octomores from Bruichladdich, which are more expensive than this. They're going to be in the $300 to $400 range sometimes, and they're just as hard to find. So if you can find the OLC 01 and it's $200 or less, I think it's worth trying. If you're a fan of sherry whiskeys, if you like peated whiskeys, if you like Bruichladdich in general, this is a marvelous expression. I'm so happy that I bought it. I think I'm gonna have to nurse this bottle because it's gonna be very easy to choose it as my nightly pour, and it's too expensive for a nightly pour. But now I'm a little spoiled because the regular heavily peated seems like such a plain peated whiskey at this point. I'm so sorry. I do love it still, but it is a little plain compared to this. So I'm really loving this whiskey, and I'm really tempted to go pick up the bottle I found at the whiskey shop in San Francisco, because I would hate to have this bottle run out and not have a backup for it. And I rarely do that with $200 whiskeys. But I'm just liking it so much. I really am enjoying this whiskey, and I highly recommend it to you. And if you're liking these videos, if you're liking my reviews, go ahead and give me a like on this video, because it really helps spread it around YouTube, and I appreciate everybody that helps me get this, this channel out there for others to enjoy. And on that note, I want to thank you for watching. Take care of yourself. Take care of those people around you. And until the next time, cheers. Yeah, adding water to this ramps it up, as it does a lot of times for me with high ABV videos. High ABV videos.